You had to go through those feelings and say, all right, this is something I'm losing. But now you're like, no, that's not losing something. That's just part of the game, part of the life that I have to live right at this moment to get what I know I need in the next moment.
Do what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do.
All right, Mr. Jude Bernard, I want to know what was your biggest close call and how did specifically discipline save that deal?
Biggest close call was pretty much the same thing as everybody else. 2008, over leverage, um, anticipating everything. Real estate's just gonna keep going up, up, up. No real knowledge. I just know that everything that I bought ended up being worth more a couple months later. Didn't understand the mechanics of how real estate really works. I didn't understand the mindset, the business, the discipline. So in 2008, when they pulled the rug from under us and everything went kablooey, um, things really fell apart. I had been out of my job. I had turned into a full-time entrepreneur, and I had vowed that I was never going back to 9 to 5. And then the worst thing that we anticipated happens is that the real estate market fell apart, the financial market fell apart, and I was pretty much the only way that I knew how to make a living was pretty much gone for the moment. But, I stayed the course. I transitioned, I pivoted, I made some adjusted. I got some education. I figured out what worked, what didn't work. And I was able to salvage my portfolio without losing one property during that time. So, and more importantly, I never had to go back and punch a clock again. So that was the win.
Yeah, that
That was
is
the win right
amazing.
there.
Yeah. What was it that made you stay so disciplined? I mean, you said I vowed to never go back, right? What was it that allowed you to just stay the course and pivot and learn and do all the things that you needed to do so that you didn't succumb to whatever was presenting itself?
I'm not sure if you could see this tattoo on my hand. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
faded and jaded, but what it
Mm-hmm.
does say, it says never again. That's 12/13/05, right? And one of the things that I've learned in life is that you can lie to anybody, but you can't lie to yourself. You're the one person that you have to be honest with. And I knew nothing else. Nothing would be more terrible, would be worse for me than actually having put to tuck my tail between my legs and go fill out an application at for a 9 to 5 and let somebody else decide what my destiny was going to be. So I was gonna have to let somebody else decide what time I woke up, what time I went to lunch, when could I go on vacation. I would have to ask for permission, for just basic simple things, can I go pick up my daughter from work? And that's not the excuse me, can I go pick up my daughter from school? And that's not the life that I wanted to lead. So it, I chose my hard, you know? I chose my hard because, it was going to be difficult. It was going to be difficult to wake up every day and grind it out and get in, it was going to be difficult to grind it out every day, find deals, work the deals, go through whatever BS I had to go through with the deals, whether it was dealing with a contractor, dealing with neighbors, dealing with the city, dealing with shiesty brokers, dealing with aggressive lawyers, whoever I had to deal with, and whatever obstacle that would face in front of me, I I viewed that as a lesser evil than
Yeah,
having
yeah.
to get up and go to work and let somebody else decide my destiny.
Yeah. And so that basically fueled you. That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that because that fueled you to find the knowledge, find the information that you needed to make the decisions you had to make to keep going no matter what.
Yeah.
Um
It was
yeah.
basically adopting the millionaire mentality, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I always tell people you're not a millionaire based on how much money you have in your account. You're a millionaire by the lifestyle that you live, your
Yeah.
priorities, your work ethic. Those are the things that constitute if you're a millionaire or not. The money in the bank, the commas, they only are a byproduct of the other things, the mindset. So, adopting that millionaire mindset, adopting that I will not lose, adopting that, um, the biggest thing is it's all on me. So many times people have victim mentalities. Oh, it's the system. Oh, it's the Democrats. Oh, it's the Republicans. As a black person, oh, it's white
Yeah.
people. No, it's like, no, at the end of the day, it's all on my back.
Yeah.
What am I going to do today?
Yeah.
How am I going to push forward? How am I going to find this deal? How am I going to finance this deal? How am I going to negotiate the best price? How am I going to educate myself so that I can take it to the next level? It's all on me, and taking responsibility, because when something does go bad, it's not the contractor's fault. It's my fault for not watching the contractor. It's my
Yeah.
fault for picking that contractor. It's my fault for going with the lowest bid as opposed to going with the guy with the more experience. So,
Yeah.
lo getting that mentality, that mindset that you take full accountability and responsibility for everything that's going on, changes your perspectives,
Yeah.
takes you from 0 to 100 real quick.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because then you're right. There's nobody to blame. There's no one to look at to try and put it on someone else's back. You take that's the ultimate take responsibility. Yeah. So thank you for that again. So give us an idea. Some of the people who may not know who you are and what you do, just give us a quick introduction as to Jude Bernard and who you are.
Hey, what's good, everybody? It's your boy Jude Bernard of Haitian descent, first generation American. I am a real estate investor, a real estate entrepreneur, a real estate broker, general contractor. I'm a landlord. I am a philanthropist. I run a nonprofit called the Brooklyn Bank, which focuses on financial literacy for underserved community. What else do I do? Oh, and my most important job is I'm a dad.
Yeah, I was going to say, wait a minute. There's one in there that's way, way more important than the rest. You're an
Exactly.
amazing dad. Yes.
So,
And
uh,
she's how old?
she is going to be 3. She's 3 going on 33. So so you
Especially girls. That's always the case.
you know the drill. You know,
Dude.
so I just gave that whole spiel of never going to work for somebody else again, and here I am, having a 3-year-old as my direct supervisor, like I'm her direct report.
That's right. Doesn't it? It's just constantly that way. It's just the way it is. Until she's, in her 20s, then you kind of back off a bit and, she takes the reins, right? Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you will instill in her that same responsibility. So, yeah, I have no doubt.
But in short, if I had to describe who I am real estate. I live and breathe it, in every aspect of it. It is it has become who I am. Everything that I look at, every time I go to a store, the first thing I wonder is like, do they own this or are they renting it? What kind of deal did they get? How did they finance this? These are all the questions that run through my mind. I walk into somebody's house and I'm assessing things. I'm just like, why didn't they do this? If they change the doors, they'd have more curb appeal and they'd be able to get a better refinance and get a better deal. So, you
Your
know,
brain never turns off. I
it
get it.
it never turns off, and it's the gift and the curse, right? Because
Yes.
it's the
Yes.
gift and the curse, because in the sense that this is the advantage that I have in regards to how I am able to amass wealth, because I am constantly working at it, and my mind is constantly working, and I'm a firm believer at whatever you obsess at is what you're going to be great at.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I 100% agree. And a very good friend of ours, Joel Lewis, his brain never turns off from marketing and numbers. And my brain never turns off from relationships and conversations. So it's whatever you put your mind to, and thank goodness you're here because your brain, you are real estate. So we are going to maximize our time with you. So let's start with thank you for that introduction again. Let's start with your journey. Right. So you say now this is the way your brain works, and now this is who you are. And as you walk into every location, you think about everything about that property and what could be improved. Maybe you look at what they already improved, whether they own it, how they did this, why they chose that. That's how your brain is working. But let's start way back in the beginning, right? What was your first property, and take me through, the sequence of events from, let's say, a single family residence to a small multi-family unit to commercial. Just kind of take us through your journey and how you got to where you are now.
Well, the very first property that I got, well, before we get into the property, let me tell you the mindset that I had.
Yeah.
Um, I was I was in college, and no, excuse me, I was working on my graduate degree. I was getting my MBA, and I had the misfortune of dating a very pretty girl, and you know, so
Yeah.
well, one thing I'm certain that you're aware of, one thing I'm sure that you're aware of are pretty girls are not cheap. They're very expensive, and I just wasn't cutting it, working at my 9 to 5 job. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a property to supplement that. So I said to myself, "If I could just get $500 a month, if I could get $500 a month in rental income, that I didn't have to trade, hours for dollars on, I would, this would help me substantially, this would help my relationship, this would make things worse. Um, so what ended up happening was, you know, I I found out that it, to buy a house, I needed a down payment, I needed credit, I needed all these things, and what I did was I leveraged the refund of my student loans on my financial aid, and I used that as a down payment to get my first property. Now, what ended up happening was I ended up getting a two-family house, um, and a, statute of limitations have passed, and it had an illegal
Go
basement.
ahead, share. Go ahead. Give us the deals.
It had an illegal basement downstairs, and, You know, uh, I ended up making, about $900 a month, but what I didn't know, what I did not know, there were so many lessons that that one property taught me. What I didn't know was these tenants, they weren't just giving me their money. I had a responsibility to them as well. I had to make sure that the place was up and running. Um, and also I had to learn, I learned the hard way that the consequences come from cutting corners. So, the fact that it had an illegal basement in it, caused me problems down the road with the municipalities, with the neighbors, just all kinds of things, all kinds of problems that it kinda laid the foundation for that I had to learn, and I always tell people, um, that, there's three ways of learning. There's 3 types of people. There's, the idiots, who don't learn from their own mistakes. There's the average Joe who learns from their mistakes, and then there's the wise people who learn from other people's mistakes. So, hopefully, there's some wise people that are watching this show, and won't have to make some of the mistakes that I've made. Right?
Yeah.
So you never
Yeah.
c so I learned never to cut corners, and in time, I ended up using the income from that property and, buying the building next door, So I started to learn the refinance game. So, secondly, I was doing all of this while I was still living home with my mom. So I was 3 properties in, while I had a job just, making bank, stacking up a little bit at a time and so forth. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is when they're young, instead of building, like taking this time where they have limited responsibility to build, they're actually putting themselves into debt. It's just like, no, you have a free ride. While you have this free ride, while you're still on mommy's dime,
Yeah.
you know, this is the way to do it,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
Absolutely.
take advantage of every situation that you have, even at work, while you're at work, instead of surfing on Instagram and Facebook and sitting at the water cooler, um, you could take that time to do other things with that time that will greatly benefit you in the future. So I tell people that all the time. Just focus on the things that are important and don't waste your opportunity. Don't waste the opportunity to make to give yourself a head start.
Yeah. And that's that's our greatest resource is time. That's the most limited resource we have. So yeah, definitely use it to your advantage.
Time is the truest form of currency.
Yeah.
I always tell people money is there's an unlimited supply of money. You just have to know how to, it's currency. That means something that's flowing. You just
Hmm.
need to figure out how do you put your hand in it and grab some out. But it's
Hmm.
unlimited. However,
Yeah.
time is a very limited resource.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
the time, the time that you blow today is gone. There's no making that
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. That's right. No compounding it.
No, not at all.
Sorry.
Well, I always tell people, once once you have true wealth, that's when you could duplicate
Yeah.
your time by using other people's efforts.
Yes. That's
By
right.
using other people's efforts, and you could actually give them a less valuable currency, which is money, for something that is much more valuable, time.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. Absolutely beautiful way to look at it because it's so true. You are leveraging other people's time with the less valuable asset of currency or the less valuable that you feel is less valuable, which is money.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Like, why would you
completely.
why would you value money more than time when
Yeah,
there's an unlimited supply of money, but there's a very limited amount of time?
yeah, that's right.
You know,
That's right. I
you know,
agree 100%.
when it comes to our time on this planet, in reality, it's just a speck. Make it
Yep.
count.
I know. Absolutely. So now take that one. You learned a ton of lessons from that first property.
I
Now
did.
bring us through. Bring us through some of the. Obviously you're at 100 million in transactions.
Yes.
So lots of properties in between. Then
Lots.
give us one of the middle level ones, and then bring us up to current time.
Okay. Like, it became, first of all, the first thing I did was realize that every property needs to be, an asset. Even my house that yeah, when I finally moved out of my mother's house, I ended up buying a house, and I house hat even before the term was coined. I lived there with my roommates. They were paying rent, and they basically paid for the house. So that house was not a liability, but it was an actual asset. I then began to play the refinance game of pulling cash out to buy other properties, which was great for the first part of my career when things just kept on going up. Unfortunately, 2008 happened, and it became increasingly difficult to sustain these properties in this manner.
Yeah.
So, I at the time I had about 8 or 9 properties, and they weren't cash flowing. You know, I was making a mistake of living off equity, refinancing, and even though the properties were not cash flowing, but paying it down. paying the mortgages with equity. I fell behind, you know. The same thing that happened to most Americans during that
Yeah.
time. And and it was I thought I knew what I was doing, but in hindsight, I realized, hey, you were just riding a wave. You were
Hmm.
coasting,
Yeah. So
you
how
know.
did you change? What did you change so that you didn't feel that way again?
Well, the first thing I did was I refused to die.
Yeah.
The first thing I did, like when things got bad and people were going to foreclosure and walking away, I said that's not going to be me. Um, I ended, since real estate was a very tough place to be between 2008 and 2014, what I
Yeah.
decided to do is I had to find a different way to supplement my income so that I could sustain. So
Yeah.
again, I turned to real estate again, but this time in a commercial aspect. I ended up buying a few event spaces, you know.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
it's still the same premise of, buying, getting an asset and renting it out, selling the time. But,
Mhm.
instead of selling it out, for a month at a time for people to sleep and eat, I started selling these 7 to 8 hour blocks of time where people would come to celebrate their birthday, their weddings, kids' christenings, because one thing I learned at that time, no matter how bad things are, people are still gonna try to have a good time,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
They're
know?
still human beings. They still have human needs and human love and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, I was able to do that for a few years. I tightened my belt. I was short term renting my own personal house where I lived at the time. Um, I had a big house in Jersey with a pool and all that other stuff, so I ended up renting that house out. Um, I would rent that house out and go sleep in my friends' on my friends' couches. Y
Yeah.
y you know? It's
Wow.
just it's just like that's the mindset. That's where I
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
like, at the end of the day, um one of the things I always tell people, never be too embarrassed. Never be too embarrassed to humble yourself, like, when it's time to do so. A lot of times people, people fall down and, they they're so embarrassed by the things that they would have to do, they just would rather just die. I was like, "No."
No. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No.
I started a hair weave business, for a couple of years, um, while real estate was picking up and I was, putting money to the side. And then I had found an opportunity. I found an opportunity. One day a friend of mine calls me up and tells me about a property that was going for foreclose it was going to be foreclosed on. And the lady who had the property was, at his place in Jamaica, and she was just going to let the property go. So people were trying to get this property for months because, there was about 1.5 million in value there. And people were just, sending her, calling and leaving messages at the door. But this woman is in Jamaica. So what did I do? I get her on the phone in Jamaica. I ended up sending her a cell phone DHL so that we could communicate. I ended up flying to Jamaica, to get a deal done. And, I ended up getting that property. That property basically gave me my first $1 million check, you know?
Wow.
That was the very first
And what
time
year?
and this was in 2014.
Wow.
And this was the rebirth
Mm.
of me as a real estate investor, on the
Yeah.
positive side.
Yeah. Yeah. And you saw that opportunity, you set it up, you knew, you at least, because of the fact that she was ready to go into foreclosure and just wanting to let it go, you saw the opportunity of the upside of the difference between what she would take for it and what it was worth,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
did whatever had to be done.
did whatever had to be done. And what ended up happening was, a lot of investors were so upset when I got this deal because they said, "Hey, I was trying to get this place for months." And I was like, "Yeah, but did you get on a plane? Did you get on a
Yeah,
plane to go get it?" Like the only way that you will get things that most people can't get is by doing things that most people won't do.
that's right. That's absolutely. And there is what kept you, like you said, what most people won't do, like sleeping on someone's couch, a friend's couch while you rent out your place. Those are things that most people, like you said, they're too embarrassed to do. They don't think about doing because it's like that means I'll lose status or lose whatever it might be in my mind as to what's more important to me than keeping this property, keeping this business going. That's the difference.
The funniest thing is I remember at one point, um, I had a, two-bedroom apartment. I had a two-bedroom apartment, and I remember sitting in there, tears almost coming down my eyes thinking about how I was gonna have to live in this place as opposed to, my 5,000 square foot house in Englewood Cliffs with a pool and all that other stuff. And tears came to my eye, and I remember being so sad about it and so distraught. And that never came into fruition. But it's funny because, like, currently, if I ever was in a situation, I wouldn't even think twice about it. It's like, "Oh, is this what I gotta do? Let's go. Let's get this
Let's
going.
go.
Let's do
That's
what we
right.
gotta do."
Yeah. Yeah, but that first mindset shift had to happen. You had to go through those feelings and say, "All right, this is something I'm losing." But now you're like, "No, that's not losing something. That's just part of the game, part of the life that I have to live right at this moment to get what I know I need in the next moment."
Do what you have to do so that you can do what you wanna do.
That's it. Yes. Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. So now let's come to today. You said, like you said, you this is just what you have to do. So let's go. What tell me about your properties now.
I have a portfolio, in the tens of millions of dollars. I own about 15 properties in New York City, brownstones, which, they go for anywhere between 2 and $4 billion each. Um, it was a long journey, but it only took me, 27 years to become an overnight success.
Isn't that funny? People still look at that and think, oh, it's an overnight success. Yeah, they have no clue what's happening in the back end to get to that.
Yeah, so I've expanded on the model, whereas I was sleeping on someone's couch, so I could rent out my house to tourists. I now have buildings. I now have buildings that I specifically have just for short-term rental, that make me, 6 figures a month in income. So it's it's come full circle, and every every day is a learn is something that I learn. Every day is a new person that I meet. Every day is a new opportunity to be reborn and be a little better, you know? And I'm
Yep. Every day
constantly
we wake up, right?
and I'm constantly I hate this guy so much, but I'm constantly competing against the me from yesterday, you
Yeah.
know? Like I gotta beat that guy. That's the only guy I'm out to beat, you know?
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
come midnight tonight, the me of yesterday is my sworn
Is
enemy that
done.
I have to annihilate, that I have to be better than.
I love
And
that so much.
it's so funny because, the me of today actually loves, loves and admires the me of tomorrow because I'm
Yeah.
because
You're
because
looking
he's
forward at them.
yeah, I'm looking at me of tomorrow, it's like, "Oh god, I can't wait to be that guy."
Yeah. Yeah.
And conversely, the me of tomorrow is looking at the me of yesterday. I hate that guy. I'm
Hate
gonna
that. Because then you don't have the boundaries, right? You don't have the guardrails. You don't if you don't look at it that way, then there's nothing to strive for and there's nothing to learn from because that's all you're looking at. You're looking at what did I learn from that guy from yesterday? so that I can improve. Today is amazingly better. And then what am I striving for to tomorrow that I can apply that knowledge to become that person of tomorrow? That's an incredible way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. It always comes down to that. Are you going to change that pretty soon to billionaire mentality?
Uh, nah, I'm actually content. You know what? I wouldn't want the stress. I wouldn't want the stress of being a billionaire. You
Yeah.
know, I still love getting on the bus.
Yeah.
Um, yesterday I had to shoot, funny enough, true story. Um, I was actually perusing the tax lien. As a matter of fact, the 2025 tax lien 10-day sale notice to see if there was any opportunities, and then I found two of my properties on there that were going that were going up for were going up for a lien sale for outstanding water bills. And I totally forgot that I acquired two properties last year and they were subject to. So I took them with the outstanding water bills on them, and I never went out and took care of the water bills. So they were actually going up for, they were actually going up for so it's hilarious because I'm on social media and I'm telling people, "Make sure that you take care," and I'm looking through this list, and 'cause there's a certain zip code I like. I was like, "Ooh, oh, wow, this is a
What
nice."
are these? Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, wow, on
A
decaf."
minute.
Wait a second. That's mine.
That my goodness, there you go. That's a lesson in take care of things. And when you get so many properties that you kind of forget that you have them and you have to find them on the list.
Yeah. And
Oh my
and
gosh.
it even got worse because after that, I said, "All right, I'm gonna go through all of them. I'm gonna go through all my properties to make sure that none of them are on this list," and I still forgot about one.
That story of just from where you started to where you are now, and the funny story about finding some of the properties that you have. I'm sure people who are on their way to that type of adventure in life and real estate are laughing and going, "Boy, that'll be a great time when I can say and I can look at the tax lien list and find one of my properties I just forgot I had and take care of it." But all through that journey there were certain risks you had to take. Do you have rules specifically for yourself in dealing with risks in this game?
One of the things that I've realized, right, especially as a former gambler, people never protect their downside. Sometimes you're so clouded by greed and hunger and ambition that all you're thinking about is getting more, but you don't put the effort into protecting what you already have, right? Um,
Mm,
one of the things that I always make sure is, one, I always make sure that I'm always properly insured. I always have insurance to the wazoo, you know? So, so on top of whatever policies that I have on every property, I also have an umbrella policy that covers.
that's pretty good protection. Yeah.
Yeah. The next thing that I do is I make sure that I'm never over leveraged. You know, um, I never have a property leverage more than 70%. So that way, even if there's a 15%, 20% correction in the market, I could always get out of it. I could always get out of it ASAP. You know,
Yeah.
nothing worse than having a property that you can't even sell if you needed to. The other thing that I always make sure of is even when I'm raising capital, I never raise capital for anything risky. So, so with that being said, um, let's say let's say I have $1 million in crypto or stocks or options or something to that matter. I will never I will never raise capital and put it into something that is volatile, you know? But I'll use my money.
Yeah.
I'll use my money and put it in something volatile, but I'll never take anybody else's money and risk that. And lastly, one of the things that, to protect myself is I never spend equity. I only transfer it. Meaning, I might take equity out of one property and put it into another property, but you will never see me taking equity out of a property and buying something with it or paying bills or traveling or anything. No. Equity is only used, you can transfer equity, but you can never use equity. That's my
Yeah.
motto. And that's how I
Yeah.
protect myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you balance that? I mean, people think of entrepreneurs as risk takers. So it sounds like where's the risk? What is it that you're risking as an entrepreneur? Or how are you being risky at all as an entrepreneur? Or are you?
I am and I'm not, you know? One there are certain things that you just can't risk. You can't like you never like I'll never risk my reputation, you know?
Definitely.
That
Yes.
the cost is just way too great,
Right.
you know? And once you are being strategic and the moves that you're making are surgical, um it's not gambling anymore,
Yeah.
you know? Like
Wow.
um if I'm getting into a property, I have rules, I don't buy and hope that a property will go up. I buy it so that, I buy it and I make sure that when I buy it, that there's already equity in it, it's already cash flowing, and worst case scenario, I could sell it or rent it and get it up and running, positively, day one. Now, with that being said, um sometimes I have to wait a very long time before an opportunity comes by that fits the mold that I'm looking for, but that's okay because once you start compromising, once you start compromising in what you're looking for, that's when you get into trouble.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. That leads us directly into thinking about exit strategies, right? There are many different ways you can think about exiting, exiting, selling, refinancing, 1031 exchanges, all that kind of stuff. Give us some ideas of how you look at that term or that idea of exit strategies.
Again, I'm never exiting as far as real estate. So sometimes I might have to transfer the wealth. I might have to sell one property to get into another, whether I 1031 exchange it or hold the cash for, a couple of days or a couple of months until it goes into the next deal. But to me, exit strategy is when I'm sitting on a beach, I'm drinking Mai Tais and I'm done. So I'm nowhere near that. So as far as on an individual property, I think you should always have multiple exit strategies, and that the property has to be able to be that fluid, where if you have to buy the property right, so that if you can't sell it, at least it could rent. If you can't rent it, at least you could short-term rental it. At least there's another function of it, you know? So, I think you always need a 360 view when you are looking at a property. You just can't say, "Oh, I'm gonna buy this property and I'm gonna sell it for XYZ." Because
Yeah.
what happens if something goes wrong,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
There are
I
too many opportunities that you don't have, too many things that could happen that you don't have control over.
And this even you know, having multiple exit strategies even causes me to spend a little bit more on my renovations because even if I'm selling something even if I am renovating something with the thought of selling it, I always keep in the back of my mind, what if I have to keep this property,
Yeah.
right? So I'm gonna spend I'm gonna spend a little bit more for the insulation. I'll get the foam installation instead of getting the the fiberglass for installation.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that everything is done properly. I'm gonna use the BX cable, not the Romex cables, because in the event that I have to keep this property, I don't want to be in a situation where I was like, oh man, I have to
I
keep this
wish.
property, but I know what's behind these walls are not pretty.
So basically you're asking yourself, if I had to hold on to this property and keep it as my own, what would I need to do to feel good about that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
that's a very different mindset
yeah,
from just making money on this property,
of course, because you never want to do anything because you have to. Like you never want to sell because you have to,
right? Yeah.
only if you want to.
That's amazing. And I love how you look at that. You're not looking at exit strategy as the ultimate exit, right? The final exit. You're looking at multiple exits. So yeah, that's why you can say you are real estate. I think I agree with that statement because you are constantly thinking about all the possible variables and all the possible opportunities and all the possible risks and all of it at the same time so that you are prepared. Did that come from a specific event or a specific
Events,
time in your life?
events.
Yeah,
It came from every time something went sideways, and again, me taking accountability and me taking responsibility. I was like, oh, what did I do to get myself in this situation?
yeah,
How did I make this, this trauma? How did I bring this trauma to my own doorstep? What did I do? And then I
yeah.
make it a point to never do that again.
That's it. All right, everybody listening, you better start doing that if you haven't done it already.
So sometimes that means I'm spending a little bit more money on education. Sometimes it means spending a little bit more time. Sometimes it's a little bit more delayed gratification. And sometimes it means doing nothing and walking away
Yeah, yeah,
because the risk
yeah,
is just
yeah,
way too great.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Wow. All right. Well, let's kind of shoot out some ideas here. I'll say some statements, and first thing that comes to your mind,
Rapid fire, rapid
if you could,
fire.
yeah, let's go, baby. Yeah. So, uh, real estate. The best thing about real estate is,
The best thing about real estate is that there's no cap. You know, this year I could make $10,000, $100,000, $100 million, or whatever. It all depends on the effort that I put into, and the effort that I put into, and what I'm willing to risk.
closing a sweet deal makes me feel.
Nervous.
All right, I gotta not pass that one up. Why? Closing a sweet deal makes me nervous. Why is that?
So let me tell you a little story. This was in the Craigslist days. I once got this ad. I found this ad, and this guy was selling a property about $600,000 below market cost, right? And I called him up, and I went to go see him, and he seemed he was a young, vibrant guy, and I just I didn't. We signed the paperwork, signed the contract, and I was like, he's he's not an idiot, right? So then I spent the next, I'd say, 30 days while we were closing trying to figure out, what the catch was. What the catch was. I looked to see if there was any structural damage, if there was a fire at the place. I never paid for an environmental report, before, and I had an environmental done in the basement just to make sure that there wasn't an oil spill. You know, I went as far as Googling the address and to see if there was a murder or something that happened at this property, right? And for the life of me, I just couldn't find it. And then we went to the closing, and I sat down with the guy and I said, "Look, The ink is dry. You have your check. Tell me, because this was like the sweetest deal I've ever gotten in my life. And I just need you to be honest with me. There's nothing I can do about it now. Everything's already done. What's the deal with this house? Because it just doesn't make sense. And he told me, um, I sold it to you for the exact dollar amount that I owed on the mortgage so that there'd be no excess, so that I'm in the midst of a divorce. I wanted to make sure that my ex-wife doesn't get a dime out of this.
There's always a reason, right? And that was
Yeah.
his.
And that was his reason. He'd rather not get his that's
Gosh. Oh my goodness. And so how did that make you feel? That made you feel nervous? Why did that make
no,
you feel nervous?
no, it gave me relief,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I had all this nervous energy around me the entire time. I'm just like, yo, this can't, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like is it this is it's
And you're trying to find it rather than just coming out to him like, dude, what is up? Why are you doing this?
yeah, but I didn't want to alert him, like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That you thought it was too good to be true. Yeah.
yeah, it was too good to be true.
Isn't that amazing? Our idea of why it's a sweet deal is very different. To him, it was a sweet deal because then he didn't have to give his ex-wife anything. So
Exactly.
yeah,
But I always tell people, in hindsight, I probably would have asked them from the very beginning, because like, your mind plays these games on you, and there was so much anxiety behind that transaction, and all this nervous energy, and me thinking of worse, and all this time that I spent trying to figure out how he was trying to dupe me.
yeah. Waiting for the shoe to drop, right? Waiting for the hammer to come down and find out really what's wrong.
Exactly.
Oh man. Yeah, we bring our own baggage. That's for sure. Wow. All right. Well, Jude, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you and just gain some of this incredible knowledge that you have. I know I could spend another few hours on this conversation, but I know we want to value everyone else's time as well. So thank you for joining me. And any last words that you'd like to give our audience before I kind of close this out?
Focus. I always tell people to just focus, you know, like, whatever you're going to do that. You know, if you want to become a real estate entrepreneur, be a real estate entrepreneur, and put all your energies into that. You can't have one foot halfway in and the other one halfway out. Um, you have to be focused and centered on doing this, and that's the only way that you're ever going to achieve anything great. Focus.
Absolutely. Follow one course until success. That's how I
Mhm.
look at focus. Absolutely. All right. All right, folks. If this conversation was interesting, it gained you insights, and as Jude says, had you hopefully learned some of the lessons from someone else's mistakes, and you want more like this, please subscribe to the show, share the show with any of your real estate friends who are interested in real estate. Browse other episodes at planetwealth.com/podcast. And then you'll have even more conversations like this, even more incredible strategies. Definitely, you will not have any other conversation with another Jude Bernard that is anywhere better than this Jude Bernard. That's for sure. But thanks so much for listening and watching. We appreciate you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode of Planet Wealth Fortunes of the Brave, check out our other videos for more insights and strategies to elevate your financial freedom. You can subscribe right here and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community and take your financial future to the next level. I'll see you in the next video.